There's a place that exists in every language, a city that appears in dreams, in paintings, in the fevered imagination of poets and historians and conspiracy theorists. A civilization so advanced, so perfect, so impossibly beautiful that it couldn't possibly be real. Except maybe it was. Atlantis. Say the name out loud. Feel how it sounds. Ancient, mysterious, lost. It carries weight, doesn't it? The weight of 10,000 stories. The weight of human longing for something better than what we have. Something we once were and could never become again. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. What if Atlantis never existed at all? What if the greatest lost civilization in history was never lost because it was never found? Because it was never there? What if we invented it because we needed to believe in something perfect that we destroyed? The story begins in Athens, 360 BC. Plato is old now, one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived, writing dialogues that will shape Western thought for millennia. He's working on two of his final texts, Timaeus and Critias, and in these dialogues, he tells a story. Not his story. He claims he heard it from his ancestor Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests, who preserved it in their ancient records. A story 9,000 years old, they said. A story about a civilization that existed before Egypt, before anything. Atlantis. Plato describes it in detail so vivid you can see it. An island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, larger than Libya and Asia combined. At its center, a city of concentric rings, alternating water and land, connected by bridges and tunnels. Walls covered in precious metals, brass, tin, and a mysterious metal called orichalcum that glowed like fire. Temples of impossible grandeur, palaces, gardens, hot and cold springs, a harbor filled with ships from every corner of the ancient world, 10 kings ruling in harmony, descendants of Poseidon himself, the god of the sea. The Atlanteans were powerful, advanced beyond measure. They had conquered much of Europe and Africa.
Then they were unstoppable.
Until they weren't. Because the Atlanteans grew arrogant, corrupt. They lost their divine nature and became greedy, violent, obsessed with power. The gods noticed. Zeus called a meeting. And then the dialogue ends. Mid-sentence, unfinished. We never learn what Zeus decided. We never get the conclusion. Plato died before completing Critias. But we know what happened from Timaeus. We know the ending. One day and one night of catastrophe. Earthquakes, floods, the entire island, the palaces, the temples, the people sinking beneath the waves, vanishing, leaving nothing but a treacherous shoal that made the Atlantic impassable. Gone. Completely. Utterly. As if it never existed. And that's it. That's the only ancient source. Plato, nobody else. Not Homer, not Herodotus, not a single Egyptian text. Despite Plato's claims, nobody mentions Atlantis until Plato, and then for centuries after him, most people think he made it up, because he probably did. This is the secret most Atlantis enthusiasts don't want to hear. Plato was writing philosophy, not history. The story of Atlantis was a thought experiment, a moral fable, a cautionary tale about what happens when a perfect society becomes corrupted by hubris and greed. It was meant to illustrate his ideas about the ideal state, about how civilizations rise and fall, about justice and power and the dangers of arrogance. It wasn't meant to be real, but we made it real anyway. We couldn't help ourselves. The image was too powerful, the idea too seductive. A lost golden age, a civilization that achieved everything we dream of and then destroyed itself. It's the perfect story. It has everything: glory, tragedy, mystery, a moral lesson, and most importantly, it's lost, which means we can never prove it's not real. So we've been searching for Atlantis ever since. For 2,000 years, we've been looking. Every generation finds it somewhere new. In the Atlantic, obviously, that's what Plato said. No, in the Mediterranean. Maybe he meant that metaphorically. No, in Antarctica, under the ice. In the Caribbean. In the North Sea. In Southeast Asia. In Bolivia. In the Sahara Desert, which used to be wet. In Ireland. In Spain. In Greece itself. Maybe Plato was describing an actual place he knew, but moved it and made it bigger. Hundreds of locations, thousands of theories. Books, documentaries, expeditions, sonar scans of the ocean floor, archaeological digs, satellite imagery analysis. And we found nothing. Not a single confirmed artifact. Not one piece of definitive proof. But here's what's fascinating. We've found lots of almost. We've found Bronze Age civilizations that were incredibly advanced and then suddenly destroyed. The Minoans on Crete, wiped out by the eruption of Thera around 1600 BC. Their palace at Knossos, elaborate, sophisticated, trading across the Mediterranean, gone in volcanic fury. Sound familiar? We found Helike, a Greek city that sank into the sea in 373 BC, within Plato's lifetime. Destroyed by earthquake and tsunami, completely submerged, rediscovered only in 2001. We found evidence of massive floods, of cities built and destroyed, of civilizations rising and collapsing throughout the ancient world. We've found that cataclysm is the rule, not the exception. That disaster is always one earthquake, one volcano, one tsunami away. Maybe Plato knew this. Maybe he'd heard stories, fragmented, distorted, of real disasters. Thera, the Bronze Age collapse, the Sea Peoples, the fall of Troy. Maybe he wove them together into a parable about impermanence and pride. Or maybe he invented the whole thing on a Tuesday afternoon because he needed a metaphor. Does it matter? Here's the paradox. Atlantis doesn't exist, but Atlantis is real, not as a place, as an idea, as a need, as a reflection of something deep in human psychology. We want to believe we were once better, that there was a time, before our time, before recorded history, when humans achieved greatness, built something magnificent, lived in harmony, knew secrets we've forgotten. And we want to believe we destroyed it, that our flaws, our arrogance, our greed, our violence brought it down. Because if we destroyed it once, that means we can build it again. If we can just be better, if we can just learn the lesson. Atlantis is the civilization we wish we'd been, and the warning about what we might become. Every culture has a version of this story. A golden age, a fall from grace, a paradise lost, Eden, Avalon, Shangri-La, El Dorado, Lemuria, Mu, Shambhala. We invent utopias in the past because we can't seem to create them in the present. And there's something heartbreaking about that, about how much energy we pour into searching for a fictional island instead of fixing the real world we actually live in. About how we romanticize the past while ignoring the future. But there's also something beautiful, because the search for Atlantis, the real search, the one conducted by serious archaeologists and oceanographers, has led us to actual discoveries, actual lost cities, actual forgotten civilizations. We found Helike while looking for Atlantis. We studied the Minoans more carefully because of Atlantis. We mapped the ocean floor. We developed new technologies for underwater archaeology. We learned about ancient climate change, about the fragility of coastal civilizations, about the power of natural disasters to reshape human history. We didn't find Atlantis, but we found truth anyway, just not the truth we expected. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Atlantis was never meant to be found. Maybe the value isn't in the destination, but in what we learn while searching, about the past, about the planet, about ourselves. Because here's what Atlantis really teaches us. Civilizations end, all of them, eventually. Not maybe, not possibly, definitely. The Minoans fell. Rome fell. The Maya collapsed. Angkor was abandoned. Great Zimbabwe crumbled. Easter Island society destroyed itself. Every empire, every golden age, every moment of human achievement, temporary. We build in stone and metal and concrete, and we think this will last. This is permanent. This is our legacy. And then the earth shakes, or the sea rises, or the climate shifts, or we make one too many mistakes, push one system too far, ignore one warning too many, and it's gone. Not slowly, quickly, one day and one night, just like Atlantis. The difference is, we know this now. We have the data. We can see what's coming. The rising oceans, the warming planet, the systems under stress. We can see the warning signs that the Atlanteans, fictional or real, never saw. We have the knowledge to save ourselves. The question is, do we have the wisdom? Or are we too much like the Atlanteans Plato described, too arrogant, too confident in our technology, our power, our ability to control nature, too focused on short-term gain to see the long-term catastrophe? Are we building our own Atlantis right now? Not a city of concentric rings and orichalcum walls, but a global civilization teetering on the edge of collapse, ignoring the warnings, choosing comfort over survival, believing that because disaster hasn't happened yet, it never will. If aliens came to Earth 1,000 years from now, would they find our cities the way we search for Atlantis? Would they dive into the flooded ruins of New York, Miami, Venice, trying to piece together what happened? Would they wonder at our achievements and puzzle over our stupidity? Would they write cautionary tales about us? Would we become their Atlantis? Their myth of a civilization that had everything and lost it? I don't know. I hope not. But standing here in 2026, watching the ice melt and the seas rise and the weather become increasingly violent, it's hard not to feel like we're living in the moments before the flood, the day before the earthquake, the generation that still has time to change course, but probably won't. Plato's Atlantis sank in a single day and night. Ours is sinking slower, inch by inch, degree by degree, choice by choice. But the direction is the same, unless we change it. And here's the thing about myths. They're not predictions. They're possibilities. Stories that show us what could happen if we're not careful. They're warnings, wrapped in wonder. Atlantis doesn't have to be our future. We can learn from it. This fictional, impossible, perfect city that destroyed itself through hubris without having to repeat it. We can be the generation that saw the warning and listened, that had the knowledge and used it, that chose wisdom over pride. We can be the civilization that didn't become a cautionary tale, but only if we try. Only if we act like the end is possible. Only if we take the myth seriously. Because maybe that's what Plato wanted all along. Not for us to find Atlantis, but for us to fear becoming it. The city is still out there, somewhere. In books, in dreams, in the collective unconscious of humanity. Perfect and doomed. Glorious and gone. A reminder, a warning, a mirror. What do you see when you look into it?